It's the Genesee County Compassion Club show. I'm your host, Jeremy, back in the studio here at allpointstv.com. How's everyone doing today? It's a gloomy spring day, April 10th, I think it is. Today's the 10th, right?
Yeah, and our yo-yo weather pattern. Cold,
yes,
warm,
exactly.
Cold, warm, cold,
the
warm.
yo-yo of April. It is upon us. Yes, another beautiful day, in spite the weather, though. All right? Got some things I want to share with you, let you know the events that are coming up at the club. We got a lot going on. And get you guys up to date with the marijuana news that we have, of course. So without further ado, let's get this party started. All right. We got Soup Kitchen coming up next Tuesday. Don't forget about that. I know we need some more volunteers, so if you guys could help us out, we definitely would appreciate it. Next Tuesday, Soup Kitchen. All right. And we're serving lunch, so you'll be back in time to still have a good time at the club. All right. So Tuesday, Soup Kitchen guys really could use your help down at the North End Charities, of course. And I'm not sure what's on the menu this time, but I'm sure it'll be tasty. So, other big event is this Saturday, Adopt a Highway. So we're getting the volunteerism out of our way, I guess. Doing our good turns.
That's the way you look at it. Let's get it out of the way.
Get it out of the way.
We want to help the community and be loved. Well, yeah, we'll get it out of the way.
Get it out of the way. Yeah. But no, we have our Adopt a Highway coming up. It's this Saturday, the 13th. Cleaning M13, so in spite of the number, I'm sure it'll still be a good thing. But it's our first cleanup of the year. Been doing this for 10 years. So yeah, I mean, when we say get it out of the way, I mean, for those of us that have been there for 10 years, we want to knock it out.
That would be kind of a challenge because, I mean, you got a lot of stuff on the side of the roads. I mean, when I go by the expressway and through the expressway, it's like ripped up tires that came off cars or trucks.
Oh, man, yeah.
You never know what you're going to find either.
We got a long list of strange items that have been retrieved from the side of M13, and for a period of time there, we got the highway as well. But we'll be back on M13 this Saturday. 10 a.m. is when we're going to be there. If you want to meet us out at M13, it's perfectly fine. We're just north of Lennon, I think is the small town out there. And our streets are basically Pearson and Beecher, in between that area there. So it's usually a nice walk and not too hard of a job. You don't want to dress accordingly for the weather. Of course, at this point, we really don't know what that is. It's saying partly sunny right now, possibly for Saturday. So keep our fingers crossed, and hopefully we'll see you guys out there. If you want to carpool, meet us at the club at 9 a.m., and we'll watch the safety video, make sure you guys are all up to par on what not to pick up and how to keep yourself safe. So please, join us Saturday if you can. Anybody can come out. You do have to be 18, and just do that for safety purposes, but anybody can join. Bring your friends and family, or like I said, just meet us out there on the road. It's perfectly cool.
I can see if Saturday, though, you come in Michigan, you can have 60, 70-degree weather one day, and you got 2 foot of snow on the next day.
It very well could be. We're supposed to be getting snow tonight, right? Somewhere in Michigan?
That's what I heard away in the UP. They were expecting maybe up to 12 inches up in the UP.
I saw that a couple days ago. I don't know if the forecast had changed since then, but yeah, I mean, that's what it is. That's how it works. If the weather's too terrible, of course, we'll cancel. And you can look to our Facebook page for updates. If you have questions Saturday morning, you're like, man, it looks terrible out. Check Facebook. We'll post on there if we do happen to have to cancel it or postpone or anything like that. We'll let you guys know so you don't drive in vain. All right. But check Facebook, Genesee Compassion Club, and check it out there. All right. Other things we got coming up here, more fun stuff, actually, is our 420 party. It's coming up very soon, a week from Saturday, April 20th, of course. Saturday, all day long, we're going to be partying. We're going to be getting it on. Got our groovy poster here. I'm pointing at a poster, right, John? All right. This is going to be awesome. Tickets are $20 in advance, $25 at the door. We have killer tickets, not just pieces of paper. They're actually like mementos, if you will. And if you've been to our 420 parties in the past, bought a ticket, you know what I'm talking about. This year's no exception. It'll be something special. And man, we've got some big events going on for 420. So we've got B-Dog coming out. We love him. He's been there every year, and I don't know what we'd do without him. So he's going to be there from 12 to 3. So when you buy a ticket, you're also getting some food and not just entertainment. But B-Dogs will be there. We're also having a Sunday bar, as in ice cream. And we're having dinner and dessert. So B-Dogs will be there from 12 to 3. We're doing the Sunday bar at 3 p.m. And at 6 p.m. we'll be serving dinner and dessert. So if you're there all day long, you're going to get fed very well. And if you buy a ticket, you can certainly stay for the whole entire time. That's what we want you to do. Just hang out, have fun, relax on this particular day. It's what it's for. Other things we got going on, we've got a henna artist showing up in the afternoon. A lot of our stuff is geared more towards the later in the day. We want to give people time to do whatever they need to do in the morning, and then they can come out and relax and hang out with us. And we're going to be open late as well on April 20th, our 420 party. So again, more people can come out and enjoy the celebration, especially if you have to work and stuff like that. I know a lot of folks have to work on Saturday. But at any rate, we have the henna artist. She'll be out here between 3 and 6 p.m. We're going to have Aran Park and the Glass Park blowing glass, doing demonstrations. They'll have their pieces and wares for sale and can do custom work there as well. We're also have, of course, we have our giveaways. We're going to have what's called Spin the Wheel. So every half hour. We got party at 420, of course. Between 6 and 9, we also have a caricature artist. 7:45, this is at night. 420 Cup winner and the 420 Twist Off. So these are going to be held a little bit later on in the day than what we have done in the past. Hopefully it'll give you guys more time to, like I said, get your stuff done and relax and have fun with us. And then at 8:30, we're going to have our 420 member card auction. Always a big deal every year. No doubt it will be big this year as well. As far as fun stuff for you guys, we're going to have the Extract Music, Big Donut, Fly-By-Night Jugglers, Jimmy Hazeman and the Honey Ride, Fly-By-Night, more Fly-By-Night Jugglers, and the Reverend Right Time and First Cousins of Funk. So lots of food, fun, entertainment. It's going to be going on all day long. Like I said, tickets are $20. We're talking about the 420 party here. Definitely want to see you guys down there. It is our 11th 420 party. We've been doing this longer in Michigan than anybody else. We know how to do it right. It'll be well worth your while. So bring your friends, bring them in, get them signed up to be a member if they aren't already. And we definitely want to see you guys down there. It's going to be best day of the year. All right. Other fun things we've got coming up here I definitely want to make mention of because they're starting soon is our golf league. So if you're into golf and you want to be a part of this, make sure you see George at the club. He'll hook you up. And also softball starting up soon. So I don't know if the roster's already filled on that, but if it isn't, or if you're interested, please check in at the club. We'll get whatever info we can to you. But both of those are starting up real soon. I think just here in the month of May, actually. So just around the corner, we'll be getting these things off and running. And, that's the fun part of spring, right? Spring training, get the body in shape, get a little fun, a little teamwork, right? Come on out. All right, so I got some news I want to share with you guys today. Definitely had some different stuff happening over the last week. And I'll start out with Michigan. So Michigan, obviously, we talked last week, I think, about the dispensaries and whether they had to close or they didn't. There was a judge that issued an order, said, no, you don't have to close, and we talked about that. So now, since then, our legislature has felt the need to get involved. So this is where we're at. You can check this out in the Detroit Free Press if you'd like to. This is what the article is referring to. It says lawmakers will try to shutter unlicensed medical marijuana dispensaries once and for all as of June 1st, under a bill that is now fast-tracked in the legislature. And then the article goes on to talk about the court and the judge that we just discussed. But it says here, under a bill introduced Tuesday and approved by a House panel Wednesday in a 5-0 bipartisan vote, any dispensary that operates without a license as of June 1st will be ineligible to obtain a license for at least 1 year. The bill now moves to the full House and has a good chance of passing there and in the Senate, according to this article. The last deadline, which is March 31st, we talked about that, is facing continued challenges in the Michigan's Court of Claims. And, of course, depending on what happens there, it could potentially be forced to close prior to June 1st. Of course, this legislation that's been proposed, it's not law yet. So, goes on here to talk about some of the other market factors. I thought this was kind of interesting. Ann Arbor attorney Benjamin Jaffe, I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name, he says, of the hard deadline, my licensees cannot compete with this unregulated market, and many temporary operators don't want to sell tested marijuana. It says here, those who have obtained licenses say they must purchase from a licensed tested grower and pay extra for secure transportation, while those who have not obtained licenses have not had to pay any fees and can buy from home growers or caregivers who are not subject to testing or secure transportation requirements. It says here there's currently 70 licensed provisioning centers. commonly known as dispensaries, and it believes there's about 50 more out there that were affected by this legislation or will be affected. The House bill has a number. It's 4440. It says it would apply to not only retailers, but to growers, processors, transporters, and safety compliance facilities. Let's see here. Representative Jim Lilly of Park Township, Representative Republican of Park Township, told the House Government Operations Committee that he believes many of those who have not obtained licenses are just stalling so that they continue to operate without being subject to the new regulations. So at any rate, that's the nuts and bolts of the article. You can read the rest of it for yourself if you want to check out more details. And as far as the representative's remarks and businesses that are just stalling, there may be some truth to that, but I have to say more than anything, obviously the state's the one that's stalling. I mean, if you're only having meetings once every 30 days and you're only looking at 10 to 20 applications when you have a list of 400 to 700 sitting in front of you, I mean, I think it's pretty clear who's stalling here. But at any rate, I also think it's pretty interesting that this attorney from Ann Arbor talks about how these new places can't compete with an unregulated place. And if we read between the lines on that, what that really means is that the product is much more expensive because of this regulation. And having a secure transport, this section of the law it's absolutely preposterous. To think that someone's going to be hijacked on the road and their weed supply is stolen is just foolish. But at any rate, it's a part of our law, and it does add a quite extensive amount of cost to the consumer, which the consumer in this case right now is only medical. All right, these are not for recreational yet. You can't go buy recreational cannabis yet in Michigan. So these places that we're talking about, they're dealing only with patients. And we've discussed this before in the podcast in extensive length, but there's obviously going to be an added cost to these patients because of this regulation. So these new licensed provisioning centers and the whole network of licensed places, regulated places, are going to have an added cost to the patient, to the consumer, the patient. And it's unnecessary, absolutely, because obviously patients are getting medication right now through an unregulated market. They're not getting sick. They're getting what they need. And these guys that are doing it through the regulations, they can't compete because the cost is so much more. And eventually down the road, we also have to look at this and say, okay, well, this unregulated market is going to eventually go away, as they say. Well, maybe it will, maybe it won't. But at any rate, the unlicensed places, if you will, they will go away. They will either become licensed or they will go away. And these new places here, are they really providing that much of a benefit to the patients? If their cost is that much more? I don't know. I don't think so. But at any rate, there we go. That's the news on this story. Definitely, I guess a lot of these things we knew were going to happen. I mean, those of us that have been in the industry for 10 years, when we saw the legislation, when we saw the things become law, we could already see the writing on the wall, knowing what this is going to look like. And it's coming to fruition. It's happening. And, patients are going to be getting the short end of the stick. That's the bottom line. Everybody wanted to cash in. We got these big, huge, multi-million-dollar conglomerate companies joining in on the bandwagon. They want to be your supplier. We've got states, agencies, government, local governments, all wanting to cash in. And where does that cash come from? Well, unfortunately, right now, it's coming from patients, from sick people. And it is disheartening that they were all so quick for the money grab. In the name of regulation, in the name of safety, which is all BS. Everybody was safe and it was regulated before. But now we've upped the ante, and ultimately it's the patients that are going to pay. So anyways, let's move on. The U.S. Attorney General, in other news, says that he prefers the marijuana reform bill to the current state of affairs. The Attorney General, William Barr, said on Wednesday that he would prefer Congress enact legislation allowing states to legalize marijuana instead of continuing the current approach, under which a growing number of states have ended cannabis prohibition in conflict with federal law. Obviously, he's referring to the new States Bill Act, which we're going to get into in just a second. He's also referring to the Safer Bill Act, which we've talked about on this podcast. Let me pull up some information on this States Bill for you so you can get a little bit of an idea of what that looks like. So let's see here. This is the SAFE Act. Move on down here to the States Bill. And I'm reading to you from National Law Review. You can check this out if you'd like to. It says here. Okay, the States Act. Has a broader reach than the SAFE Act. April 4th, a bipartisan team of legislatures reintroduced companion versions of the Strengthening the 10th Amendment through Entrusting States Act. Acronym is States Act. In both the House and the Senate. The States Act would amend the Controlled Substances Act to restrict federal enforcement against state legal cannabis activity. In particular, the bill prevents the application of the Controlled Substances Act to individuals or companies acting in compliance with state law relating to the manufacture, production, possession, distribution, dispensation, administration, or delivery of marijuana. In addition, the law would prevent forfeiture of any assets derived from state legal marijuana businesses and would exempt state legal marijuana businesses from the definition of specified proceeds of illegal activity under the money laundering laws. States Act was introduced in Congress in 2018. President says he would probably end up supporting it, and this was in spite of Attorney General Jeff Sessions, even though he's not really part of the picture anymore. But so there we go. The States Act, that's basically what it does. It's a significant step towards eliminating the issues posed by the dueling federal and state law with regard to cannabis. And this is in conjunction, well, I guess I shouldn't say in conjunction, but it really is part of the same package as the SAFE Act. So we have the States Act doing one thing, the SAFE Act doing another, which the SAFE Act is more based around banking, and we've talked about that. It provides a safe harbor from federal money laundering and regulatory prosecutions, allows businesses to bank, through normal banking measures that are either state licensed marijuana places or even places that serve the marijuana industry that but aren't necessarily state licensed. So ancillary businesses, but allows for their banking, allows for their transactions to be done in a normal fashion. So two different things being addressed. Neither one of these actually make cannabis legal on a federal level, which is kind of interesting. But they both are small steps forward in the right direction to allowing states and the businesses and individuals involved in those states to do business as a regular, legitimate business versus being treated as a criminal. So walking in with your bank deposit or whatever, or trying to open an account as a marijuana business, it can't be done, which is quite ridiculous. You think, especially where these people have licenses, like myself, I've gone through the process, going to the state, pay for the license, here's my card. It's legit. Why can't I bank? There's no reason why I shouldn't be able to bank, but yet you can't. And we need this act to go through to change that. So the SAFE Act was passed out of committee, and it is to the House floor for a vote. The States Act, I believe, let's see here. Well, it was introduced in 2018. Yes, I'm trying to give you a current update on where it's at, but that's the SAFE Act. Let's see here. Other than it just being in committee or whatever. Oh, there it was. Let's go back to here. Oh, well, I guess it was reintroduced, so that's why it's back in the news again. But my apologies for the confusion there. But at any rate, yeah, it was originally introduced in 2018. It's been reintroduced now. They have to do that. They have new legislators or whatever. But this is in conjunction with the SAFE Act. We need both of them to go through. So at any rate, that's where we're at with those. Wanted to share that with you. The U.S. Attorney General, basically coming out and saying that he supports these bills, that he likes them better than the current state of affairs. And he's not a legislator, so that doesn't, make a difference, but it does hold water. I mean, it's a lot better than our last Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, who has said, no, I hate marijuana. I don't want anything to do with it. It was just Stone Age mentality. So this is better. This is interesting news I want to share with you. We don't hear enough about our American Indian heritage, I feel. But at any rate, here's a little news for you. The Bay Mills Indian community in Chippewa County is the first tribe in Michigan to legalize recreational marijuana. The tribe's ordinance mirrors Michigan's recreational marijuana law when it comes to having and growing your own. So the new law says anyone 21 or older can have it, use it, but commercial businesses are not allowed on Bay Mills Reservation. It says anyone that has previous convictions in tribal court for marijuana-based offenses can move to have their convictions removed. And as of yet, Bay Mills is the first tribe in Michigan, federally recognized tribe, to legalize recreational marijuana. So I want to share that with you. Like I said, I thought that was kind of cool. There's quite a few different federally recognized tribes in Michigan. I don't know all of them, but Bay Mills is the first one to step up and say, hey, we should be able to do this. Government says it's okay. We say it's okay too. So that's cool. All right, last thing I want to cover today is a subject that I think is on a lot of people's minds, especially with states like Michigan and others coming to the wheel, literally, with marijuana. And we're talking about driving. So I think for those of us that have been around cannabis for a long time, or at least an extended period of time, there's a lot less hysteria around it. But for someone who's never experienced cannabis before, that and talking about driving is a very scary thing. And I think that's something that we have to understand as a community and address appropriately. So certainly no one wants to increase the amount of risk that we face on the road, and we don't want to have that happening, obviously, with impairment. So this is a legitimate subject matter, but I think that we have to look at it very carefully, because we want to make sure that we're not making criminals out of innocent people. We also want to make sure that we're keeping our roads safe. So I want to share some information with you about driving and marijuana, and without further ado, I'll get to it. So this was in Colorado, and I'll get to Michigan in just a minute. But Colorado is currently doing a study on cannabis and driving, and they're actually looking for volunteers. So, but to get into that, let me back up a little bit here. It says, obviously, it's difficult for law enforcement and prosecutors to prove that a driver is impaired by cannabis. Some states use a per se THC blood content threshold, but a 2016 study by the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety concluded that a quantitative threshold per se laws for THC following cannabis use cannot be scientifically supported. So that's a pretty firm statement. State laws and penalties on cannabis impairment vary widely, and in Colorado, the Department of Transportation website states that any amount of marijuana consumption puts you at the risk of driving impaired. Drivers in Colorado found with 5 or more nanograms of active THC in their blood can be prosecuted for driving under the influence. The DOT website warns that no matter the level of THC, law enforcement officers base arrest on observed impairment. The debate on the subject can get extreme, of course. A new study is now underway at the University of Colorado and is trying to get to the bottom of the issue. Researchers are currently seeking volunteers willing to smoke up and get behind the wheel of a sophisticated driving simulator. And you've got to bring your own weed. Let me move on here to Michigan then in a second. So Colorado's limit's 5 nanograms. Basically, AAA came out and said that's ridiculous. You can't base that scientifically on whether or not somebody's actually impaired. And for those of us that have used cannabis for an extended period of time, absolutely could attest to this. There's people walking around with a lot more than 5 nanograms of THC, active THC in their blood, and they are perfectly fine and are not impaired in one way or another. So how do you accurately gauge whether or not this person should be behind the wheel? Let's move on to Michigan. This is from, let's see here, bridgemichigan.com. Michigan State Commission recently recommended that lawmakers not set a marijuana threshold to define drugged driving, akin to the blood alcohol content threshold, akin to Colorado's 5 nanogram threshold for THC. Says here, because the body processes marijuana differently than alcohol, the traditional measurements won't cut it, the commission concluded. And they're correct. 6 other states with legalized pot have set a blood level for impaired driving, so the Michigan Commission's recommendations may be unsatisfying to marijuana proponents who pushed legalization on the premise that it could be regulated like alcohol for marijuana opponents who feared legalization would wreak public safety on Michigan cities, including car crashes. And Carol Flanagan, a professor at the U of M, who specializes in traffic safety and served on the Impaired Driving Safety Commission appointed by Governor Snyder to research a THC limit and report back to the governor and legislature. Her comments are, we want things to work or to look like alcohol. The way that alcohol works with impairment and blood levels of alcohol is convenient for measurement and enforcement. But critics say the lack of standards may give too much discretion to police officers, though they agree the state shouldn't set standards without supporting science. The issue is one of many gray areas Michigan officials are navigating as the state transitions to legal recreational marijuana following our ballot measure. Now, getting into the specifics, says here, unlike alcohol, there isn't a direct link between how much of marijuana's intoxicating component THC is in a driver's blood and their level of impairment, said Flanagan. That's because pot isn't linear. There's a spike in THC levels right after smoking that quickly drops to low levels, even though users may feel high for hours, she said. Conversely, traces of pot can be found in users' blood for days after they're high. So super stoned drivers can have little THC in their system, while others could be dead sober and show the same amount. That's why the report recommends that if police suspect drivers are high, officers should perform the same roadside test as for drunk drivers. Among them, following a light, with the eyes, walking heel to toe, standing on one leg for 30 seconds. These standard tests have mixed results for detecting intoxication, the commission found, but they're essentially the best option police currently have to test impairment on the roadside. And I've talked about this before in the podcast, and I believe that to be correct. I think the roadside impairment test is really the best way to go. I realize there's folks out there that, just can't do their ABCs backwards. Maybe they can't stand on one foot. But I think the officer's ability to decipher whether or not you should be behind the wheel is probably the best gauge when dealing with this type of situation. And I feel that way for most impairment situations. Whether it be someone is just sleep deprived and they're too drowsy to be behind the wheel, not just drunk or high. So, does field tests give police too much discretion? That's a legitimate concern, says Brett Rendero, an attorney specializing in cannabis law. On television, roadside tests involve stumbling drunks falling out of cars, but what about those areas where it's not so obvious? Is there potential for the police to allow their prejudices or mere suspicion to color their subjective determination of whether someone has a roadside sobriety test? Carol Taylor, a professor of sociology at MSU, said, it's going to be a nightmare, a wide open for abuse. Neither the public nor police know enough about how legalized marijuana will work in practice, she says, which is a recipe for roadside clashes with cops. It's virgin territory. Flanagan, the UM professor, said the commission discussed concerns about police subjectivity extensively. Until cannabis-specific tests become more reliable, roadside tests are the best option, she says. So I would have to agree with Flanagan, only on the mere grounds of the argument that if there is not a scientific way to measure this, there just simply isn't a scientific way to measure this. You have to figure out some other means to determine someone's ability to operate that motor vehicle. If you can't do it scientifically, there's got to be another way. And I think a roadside test is the other way. That is the other way. If they can't do it, maybe you shouldn't be behind the wheel, even if you are stone sober. If you can't, Now, I agree. Obviously, they already have protocols for dealing with people with disabilities. They figure that out. They have training for those things. Is it the best training in the world? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But if you don't have the science to do it, we can't just make up the science, right? As they've done in other states. We don't want to see that happen here in Michigan, because what it leads to is false convictions. It's not really providing safety, which is what we're really concerned with. As the public, as an individual, what are you really concerned with? You're concerned with safety. You don't want to drive down the road, have somebody forget what they're doing, and drive into you, right? But if we don't have a scientific way to figure that out, well, we can't just create one out of thin air. We have to do it another way. So I would have to agree with the professor. I think that's absolutely the way. Governor Gretchen Whitmer recognizes that there still needs to be a process in place to identify impaired driving and protect motorists, and she's ready to work with experts and her legislative partners to get it done. That seems to be her mantra. I'm ready to work. Anyways, House Speaker Lee Chatfield has not yet seen the report. His spokesman said... the Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey did not respond for comments. Michigan State Police have piloted a roadside spit test for marijuana and other drugs that is promising, Flanagan said. The test is better at determining whether someone used marijuana recently, which would help reduce the chance the cops arrest someone who is sober but shows THC blood levels from previous use. Says entrepreneurs in California have also developed a roadside breath test that promises to measure whether someone uses cannabis recently. It's being tested by a few police departments in the region. It says here, it's hard to do research on marijuana because of its status as an illegal drug. So I have some hopes that we can get it somewhere, says Flanagan. They continue to throw that objection out left and right every time they don't have a report that says exactly what they wanted to say. And I think sometimes you just have to understand that you're not going to get it. Or maybe you should just go out and do it yourself. But anyway, I get tired of that objection. Oh, we don't know about this because government says it's illegal, so we can't do research. There's been research up the wazoo on cannabis. All you need to do is do a little research on your own to find it. So, I'm not trying to harp on Ms. Flanagan. She's probably a very well-educated person. But at any rate, there's a lot of research out there. And just because it wasn't done in Michigan on Michiganders doesn't make it irrelevant. But we should definitely look at some of the other examples, some of the other states, some of the other countries, see what they've done, see how they deal with these issues. I know that in the U.S., we drive more than anybody else. We love our cars. So in a way, we should be the leader of how to legislate our transportation. You know what I mean? We should be at the forethought of how to deal with this type of thing. And I don't know that we are, but I think that at least so far, our state seems to be taking a sensible approach. I definitely appreciate the recommendation where they said, hey, look, we don't have the science to back this up. So we can't really give you a standard to go by because it doesn't exist. It's not accurate. You're going to be putting people in jail that shouldn't be there. You're going to be telling people they're impaired and they haven't touched cannabis in 2-3 days, maybe longer in even some periods, when the effect of the high is only really maybe 2 to 4 hours after someone's smoked it. And the other thing is if you notice in these articles here, nobody even talked about the difference between an edible and someone who's been smoking. They just talk about cannabis use in general. And for those of us that have been medical for 10 years, we know there's a big difference between the two, a big difference. And someone who regularly consumes cannabis could very easily get themselves to feel impaired, get themselves to be in a position where they should not be driving by consuming an edible. And they have to make that decision for themselves, just like we all do every single day when we get into our car. So I don't think this is anything different than a lot of the other issues that we face when it comes to traffic safety. If someone should not be behind the wheel, they have the personal responsibility to not get behind the wheel. And if they do something stupid, they should be held accountable for it. I think that's the bottom line. So at any rate, marijuana driving, it's not over yet in Michigan. We're going to see more on this, I'm sure, in the future. I think we need to pay attention to whatever they come up with. The spit test thing, I've heard about that, the pilot program that they've been doing. How accurate is it? I've heard that there's controversy to the accuracy of this program, whether it's not, whether or not it really is accurate. And we need to question those things. A lot of the drug testing that's done nowadays is not accurate, and it's not talked about. So when we so heavily rely on these mechanisms to sort of set a standard or draw a line, raise the bar, whatever it may be, well, if we're going to put that to a standardization, we need to make sure that that's accurately determining the results that we're looking for. And, you could say the same thing about our public schools. And I think sometimes we rely on these tests too much instead of looking at the reality of the situation and going, yeah, this person is impaired or they're not, and dealing with it accordingly. So at any rate, that's that. That's all I have on driving. Obviously, the big thing is if you feel impaired at all, any way, shape, or form, don't get behind the wheel. Don't risk it. It's not worth it. Have somebody, drive you, get a cab, wait, whatever you got to do, but don't get behind the wheel. And remember, as we have just recently legalized cannabis for adult recreational use, don't be the poster child of why we shouldn't have done that, because that's what you will be if you end up, going out and killing some kid because you were high. And the newspapers will love to print that headline. Don't give it to them. Don't be that person. Be safe. All right. And I think most people that, consume cannabis tend to err more on the side of caution. Now, almost everybody I've dealt with, talked to, for the most part, when it comes to especially getting behind the wheel, operating a motor vehicle, people tend to be more cautious under the use of cannabis. And in fact, there's a video. You can go on YouTube. I hope it's still there, where I think it was the BBC, did a driving test. They actually took people out in the cars. One was sober, one was drunk, one was high. And they did test with them on a closed course. And I'll never forget, one of the tests was they had a little plastic baby doll. And, they would just place it on the course somewhere, without the driver knowing. And so it kind of surprised the driver, if you will. And the driver had to try to avoid it. The sober person didn't have a problem. The drunk person ran the baby over, and the high person stopped 40 feet before they ever got to the baby. It was comical almost to see the amount of caution. You could visibly see it in the car being driven. That person was scared, and I don't know if that made them safer per se. Sometimes you got that person who's trying to be extra cautious, and they cause an accident because of it. But at any rate, they were not the emboldened drunk driver that we have seen, that we've grown accustomed to, that we've heard all of these terrible stories of. They were on the opposite spectrum as far as their characteristics in operating that motor vehicle. And I think most people that use cannabis regularly would agree with me. And there's been quite a few. I'm personally a fan of racing, whether it be cars, motorcycles, whatever. I can tell you there's been quite a few race car drivers, motorcycle drivers that love weed. They love it, and they consume it regularly. I don't know that they're doing it before they go out and do the Indy 500 or anything like that. But at any rate, it doesn't really affect their performance. Where clearly, you don't expect somebody like Allens or Junior or somebody like that to be getting all liquored up the night before and hopping into his car Sunday morning hungover. Probably wouldn't make it. Maybe they did. But at any rate, I think cannabis is way safer than alcohol, and on a whole lot of levels, not just when it comes to operating motor vehicles. So, but the most important thing is be safe. Be safe, be careful. All right, that's about it for today's show. That's the news I wanted to share with you. Big thing is, make sure you please help us out with the soup kitchen. The Adopt a Highway, we definitely need you guys to help volunteer. It's our way to give back and also to continue to show that people that consume cannabis aren't any different. They're actually very caring individuals, not just about themselves, but about their friends, their family, and their community. And it's our opportunity to reach out and to prove that by doing things like this. So definitely we need your help next Tuesday and this Saturday. And then, of course, we want to see you guys join us, please, for our 420 celebration. April 20th. It's going to be absolute awesome party, and couldn't imagine it without you there. So come on down and join us, and you guys have a fantastic week. All right, enjoy your spring. See ya.